Hello and welcome to the North Metro SBDC programming.
All right, welcome everyone again to the webinar, Is Opening a Childcare Business Right for You? So my name is Raul Lopez. I am with the Small Business Development Center for Colorado, and our center services the North Metro area, Adams County and Broomfield County. And we have mostly no-cost programming, some low-cost programming, and no-cost one-on-one advising. Amazing, amazing service. And this is made possible in part due to federal grants, also in part by many, many partners. But one of our partners is actually here today sponsoring this series. So this is part one of two-part childcare series. And our City of Westminster Economic Development is here, Miss Shelby Wood, and also I think the mayor might be here. I'm not sure, or I'm just reading that name wrong.
Oh,
And
I was just going to say, the city of Westminster is very proud to help sponsor these programs, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Normally, Stephanie Trotter is who you would be working with, and she has left the city, so I am sitting in her place and welcome you.
awesome, thank you for being here. Yes, and I know Shelby, you're also here. So this is partly made possible by their contributions to the center and their investment in their community and wanting to bolster the childcare businesses in their city and in those other areas that we've talked about. So, because it's a very important and crucial industry, and we want to make sure you're successful as well. So, anyone that is just reached here, brand new, please make sure you fill out the poll that is in front of you. Super crucial that we get that filled out. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dora, as she is our childcare specialist. She's amazing, and she makes it really fun and really easy to talk about these things. So if you have any questions at any time, also, please just drop them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself during a break and reach out to Dora. Dora's very chill about it. So Dora, please.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name's Doris Barza. I've been working with the North Metro SBDC for about 4 or 5 years now. I'm getting older. It's a long time, but I can't promise I'll make this fun, but I'll make it as fun as I can. I've been working in early childhood administration for about 20 years now. I do a lot of business coaching with childcare programs that are currently open, and then a fair amount of programs work with people that are trying to open programs. We've been running this childcare business essentials class, which is absolutely fantastic. But we do want to kind of do this webinar a little bit to get people thinking about, is this a good business decision for you? Is it a good personal decision for you? And just some different things to think about. There's a fair amount of writing on these slides, but you guys will get a copy of these. And I do that so that you guys can really read through these again and think through it when you might have a little more time to really put some thought into your personal planning. And with that, we'll get started. So one of the first things you want to think about is, do you have a basic knowledge of child development and a passion? If you are looking to create a business because you just want to make a lot of money, this might not be the thing for you. Watching children it's very rewarding, but it can also be fairly exhausting. And it's really something you need to have a passion for, serving children and families, and really a heart for this work. So that's really the first thing you need to decide, is whether or not this is really something you're passionate about. Do you know about age-appropriate activities, behavior, safety and supervision? Do you know generally how children should act based on their age and what's age appropriate for them? If you've worked in a childcare, preschool, a nannying, if you have watched your grandchildren or somebody else's children and you found that really rewarding, all those kinds of things are really indicators that you might really actually enjoy watching children and want to get into a business model that is serving children and families. It's also important to remember that watching one child is very different than watching multiple children. One infant is very different than 2 or 3 or 4. So thinking about, can you handle different needs at once? Can you handle multiple children at once? Staying calm under pressure, whether that be from parents or children. and really thinking about, structure, management, routines. And if you're really not sure and you're like, I don't really know and I want to see what this is like, I'd strongly encourage you to find a program in your community that you can just go volunteer at or observe at and just really see like what this care and business model looks like on a day-to-day basis. It's hard to explain. I mean, it's easy to explain it, but it's not easy to understand unless you're really watching, the work, the rewards, seeing how people interact with children. So I would recommend an observation if that's something that you really want to get into, just to see what this looks like on a day-to-day basis, and also to talk to those business owners and administrators to ask them about potential challenges, what that work-life balance might look like. So I'd really encourage you guys to kind of get in there and really observe some of these programs to see what this really looks like on a day-to-day basis. You have read and understand the Colorado Child Care licensing rules and regulations. If you were going to open,
Dora,
just say
we're not seeing any slides yet. You're not sharing.
no.
Your screen.
Oh
You
no.
just get to see your amazing face.
Okay, I'm gonna try this again. Just going through things. Okay. How about now?
No.
Yeah?
No.
No. All right. Raul, would you mind sharing your slide deck? Oh.
Oh, somebody can see the slides. Okay, great. I'm just on the wrong window, probably.
Okay.
Can everyone see? Can everyone else see the slides? No problem.
Hold on, let me check. Okay. This is like a fun quiz to keep you guys awake. Is everyone seeing a book with glasses on it?
Yes. Now
This is
we're
how I
good.
know who's paying attention. Okay,
Awesome.
perfect. So another big piece of this is reading and understanding the Colorado childcare rules and regulations. So if you were going to open a restaurant or you were going to open a hospital, like you need to kind of know what the rules and regulations are that regulate those business models and practices. And they're very long. You can put them into ChatGPT to kind of summarize them for you. There's a lot of checklists. There's a lot of resources on the Colorado Department of Education. Colorado Department of Early Childhood. But you really do want to know what you're getting into. There is a lot of regulation in this area and a lot of rules that you need to follow. So there's different licensing types. We'll get into that more in a minute. You do need to do background checks on people. You need CPR and first aid. There's a fair amount of like required training in addition every year for employees of early childhood programs. So that could be challenging behaviors, that could be classroom trainings, but there's also like additional professional development requirements. And also the public health department has kind of a say around these rules and regulations as far as the temperature of the water, whether or not, you have different plans for if there's an outbreak, if there's measles, mumps, or rubella. So there is like a public health department aspect to this as well. There's also regulations around child to staff ratios and how many children can be watched per adult. You can also have home safety inspections through licensing as well. So this is really like, your second step. Do you like children? And have you read and understand the rules and regulations? And if you have questions about that, it's important to get those answered before you get into this because there is a fair amount of regulation. It's not impossible and it's not super challenging, but it is something that you just need to understand because those really do regulate how your business is running and how it operates, which also has an impact on your financials as well. So these things are very important to understand. Do you have a clear business plan? So even just, you don't need a fancy format, you don't need a 20-page business plan, but you do need to really be thinking about who you're going to serve. If you want to do infants and toddlers, what the budget might look like for that. If you want to do preschool, what the demand is for that. Do you want to participate in various funding streams? There's UPK, which is a state-funded preschool program. There's Denver preschool program if you happen to be located in Denver or you're serving parents in Denver. There's CCAP. There's some different funding streams. And so that will also factor into your business plan as well. You also need to consider your pricing and your tuition and how that compares locally compared to other programs in your area as well. What the demand is in your area. So maybe you have a lot of demand in your area for infants and toddlers, but not as much for preschoolers. Then what would that budget look like? What does your space look like? How many can you serve? It's also important to think about your estimated costs. So food, supplies, insurance. Think about like an operating budget and what that would look like to start up. So looking for a property that would work. If you're going to use your home, you're welcome to do that as well. But really looking through all those things to really think about what your operating startup is going to be. And then you also need to think about how many children you need to break even. We talk about this a fair amount in the Business Essentials course just around financials. But you do need to know what your cost is per child that you're caring for, and that will kind of help determine what tuition you're charging. If you're guessing or you're not sure about this or you haven't kind of thought through some of these things, then you really want to slow down and do your research before you open a program. So there's a couple different types of licensing programs and different models of care, kind of going from the easiest to kind of the largest. So there's FFN care. This is family, friend, and neighbor care. This type of caregiving model is usually something people don't even think that they're doing. You know, if my sister's watching my infant 3 days a week while I have to go into the office, she might not understand or recognize that she is a caregiver. This type of childcare is exempt from licensing. So you can watch 4 or fewer children in your home and not have to go in accordance to licensing requirements. That being said, it's still always good to take trainings, get educated. There's some parameters around, you know, how do you put infants safely to sleep? How do you childproof your home? There's different trainings around that, but this particular type of care doesn't fall under a licensing umbrella for childcare licensing. The second one is family childcare home licensing. This is a type of care that's licensed in a home for 5 or more children being cared for in a home setting. And how many children you care for is really based on the ages of the children. So it kind of depends, you know, you can only watch so many infants at the same time. So it kind of limits that based on your home environment as well. Then there's a small child care program. This type of program is usually just one classroom and provides care for 5 to 15 children. It is, you know, a licensing thing. It's subject to licensing rules and regulations. It's just kind of a smaller program. And then there's a large child care program, and that is really a licensed child care facility that cares for more than 16 children. So those are usually those larger programs that have multiple classrooms. They have a whole infant classroom, toddler classroom, preschool classroom. They are usually the biggest type of program. I will just say as a disclaimer, just because you're a larger program doesn't necessarily mean that you're making more money. So it's worth really thinking through some of these models to determine what would be the most financially feasible and really look at a budget for what the costs would be. So that's kind of another step to think about, is what the type of program would be that you would want to open. You're financially and emotionally prepared. Watching children can be a lot. It's super rewarding, but we also know that the workforce can get burned out pretty easily, and it is very exhausting. Can you handle inconsistent income? So when you're opening, how can you open? And, you know, you might have high enrollment, low enrollment. You're trying to open and market and get families in, and maybe you started a waiting list before you opened, you know, so that you have families ready to go. Like, that's great. But it can be kind of inconsistent at the beginning, and think about whether or not you're financially stable enough to handle that inconsistent income. Do you have funding to obtain a loan or open a program and the cost to the funds to cover startups? So if you do need to put some money down for a loan, or you need to put a deposit down on a property or anything like that, you know, do you have those startup costs, or at least do you have a plan to be able to get a loan to obtain the funding that you would need to start up? And that's really where you'd want to put that in a startup budget and really kind of think through what those costs might be. Do you have savings or a backup plan in case something changes? How are you going to fund your business if there's gaps in enrollment? Sometimes there's gaps between, you know, maybe you have a lot of school agers and then those all go away during the school year, or different things kind of change. Or if something like COVID happens again, like, do you have the money to really have a backup plan if there's gaps in enrollment or something happens? Are you okay with long days and high responsibility? Early childhood is a field where just because your workday's over, that doesn't necessarily mean you're done. You have staff that might call in for the next day. You might have parents that want to talk to you after they've gotten home and it's kind of late. You might have parents that want to call you with questions. It can be kind of a long day, and it's not really like a 9 to 5 kind of model. So that's also something to think about. And there is also a lot of responsibility in early childhood. Children fall, they drop things on their head, they, climb over everything they can find. And any of those injuries are happening under your watch. So it is a lot of responsibility. And that's really something to consider. How am I going to take care of myself and my staff to avoid burnout? How are you managing your self-care? How are you trying to work through that work-life balance? And think about like what parameters you'd put in place for that if you opened a business where it's not really like a 9 to 5 kind of model. And really burnout is one of the biggest risks in this field. People work really hard, they get exhausted, and then they just don't want to do it anymore. So it's important to have a plan ahead of time around how you're going to emotionally manage yourself, your ability to handle changes, your ability to handle funding that might be inconsistent. So it's important to have a plan for that before you move forward as well. Your space or a planned space is suitable for childcare. This is one of the biggest barriers I think I'm seeing right now is that there's not toilets or a bathroom in a certain classroom, or if you're serving infants, they need 2 sinks in the classroom if you're doing a licensed program. So how are you really working to make sure that that space is going to be appropriate? How are you going to make sure that space is licensed? The properties themselves currently are the biggest issue that I've seen. And that takes a fair amount of funding. If you're going to start up and you find a space in a strip mall you think is going to be great, how are you going to put up the walls you need? How are you going to run the plumbing to have sinks, multiple sinks in infant and toddler rooms, and then at least 1 sink in every preschool room? Where's the bathroom access going to be? So that's kind of in the larger licensed programs, that's really one of the barriers that I'm seeing right now. There's always a way to get through it, but it does take a fair amount of startup costs. And then whether you're at home or in a licensed center, you're going to need safe indoor and outdoor areas, different areas of the space, science, blocks, cozy areas, books. And then thinking about what your outdoor space might be. Do you have a nice patio area if you're doing FFN care? If you have a family childcare home, what does your backyard look like? And is it safe? Can you keep the children safe? Is there something for them to play on or play with? And then think about diaper changing and potty training. If you're doing infants and toddlers, you're going to need a changing table, that changing sink, potty training for toddlers as well, and really thinking about how you're going to handle those types of care needs for those ages. Think about areas near home that will need to be blocked off with baby gates, blocking off the kitchen, making sure you have baby locks for any kind of chemicals or cleaners, anything like that. Keeping your purse safe, all that stuff. How will you feed the children? Will you be preparing food? What food are you going to prepare? What does that look like for your budget? Are parents going to bring food for the children? Do you have a place to store that? Childproofing again, and then having enough room per child. So various licenses require various amount of square footage per child. When you get into the larger programs, it's a certain amount of shade as well. So depending on what kind of license or what kind of program you want to open, there's some licensing regulations around space. And then how are you going to have a clean and organized setup for the children in your care? So those are kind of some space needs to consider. All right, communication with families and parents. This is kind of the customer service element of early childhood. So a big part of the job is giving updates to families. If you suspect a child might not be speaking the way they should for their age, or you have concerns around biting or some kind of other behavior, being able to communicate that with parents in a way that is receptive and responsive and calm and supportive is really important. People obviously care a lot about their children. That is like the big thing in their life. So ensuring that you're able to communicate in a way that is, sensitive to parents is very important. Creating policies and procedures. The policies are really what your rules are going to be around how you operate, and the procedures are what you're going to do in various situations. You also need to understand basic accounting and budgets. That's something we go through in that Child Care Essentials class, and that's really important. The financial piece is very important. This field doesn't make a ton of money, and there is a lot of regulation, so it's important to understand where your money is going and to kind of have a cash flow in your mind about how things are going to operate. How are you going to handle concerns professionally, setting boundaries, managing expectations for parents, like I will not return phone calls after 6 o'clock p.m. or whatever kind of, expectations you want to set. And then you also might encounter challenging parents or challenging child behaviors, and thinking about what resources you might have for that. Because this is a family-centered field, there are occasionally things where a parent might have a protection order against another parent, or you might have a parent that shows up intoxicated. These things don't happen often, but they can happen, and it's important to really think about how you would handle those types of issues. And then what will you do if you suspect that a child has special needs, that they might not be developing in a way that's age appropriate? What resources do you have, and how would you kind of handle that conversation? Because again, those things come up, and if you are specifically like conflict averse, it can be very hard to have those conversations. So it's definitely something to think about. As I said, you guys will get these slides, but I did want to kind of put like a checklist in here. If this is something you're seriously thinking about, I would really sit down with some of these questions and think through, yes, I've done that. No, I can't. Yes, I think I have the skills for that. Maybe I haven't looked into the business readiness piece specifically, so maybe that's your next step. If you haven't read licensing rules and regulations, that's always a good place to start. Because you really do need to understand what the rules and regulations are for this industry, because then you're able to really anticipate those and see how those fit into how you operate. If you're emotionally ready for this, it is a very demanding field, but it's also very, very rewarding and very community-based. Like a lot of the programs that are set up are serving the community in your area. And it's important to build relationships and partnerships, and it can be a great way to really, bond with your community and serve the community around you and the families around you as well. So this is kind of broken into some of the areas we talked about: experience and skills, safety and responsibility, licensing rules and regulations, business readiness, emotional readiness, working with parents, thinking through the environment that you might have and how you can kind of manage your environment to be prepared to work with children. And then, is this something you want to do as far as your own work-life balance? And that understanding it's not just playing with children. Like you might really have a passion for children, but this is a lot of the business side and the childcare side, family side, accounting side. Like there's a lot of pieces to this, and it's also important to understand that as well. Here's just some motivational questions. And then if you go through this with yourself, your partner, anything like that, this kind of gives you a little guidance of, you're either ready or really close, or like you might want to really rethink about this. And again, if you get through this and you're like, I really do think this is something I want to do, and let's say you pick a family childcare home license model, you should go through and find a family childcare home to observe and just call them and say, hey, I'm thinking about opening up a childcare program. I'm looking at a family childcare home model. Can I just kind of come observe you and ask you questions and see what this is really looking like for you and what your experience is in this? So I think that part really is important. I don't think you should enter any industry if you haven't at least observed it and understand what you can about what the day-to-day of that looks like. So that is kind of that. I did want to leave a fair amount of time here for questions. If somebody's looking to open a program, if they have questions around anything we've kind of covered, I think it's important to ask questions, and this is kind of a safe space to do that. So we can all kind of talk about this. You guys are here for a reason, so I expect questions. If nobody has any questions, but you took the time to be here, then I'm going to be very suspicious. Everybody fell asleep. What happened?
Hi, so I have a question.
Mhm.
I have a son with special needs. He is autistic. And I was just toying with the idea. It's just an idea in infancy stages right now. If one could open up like a specialized childcare facility for
Mhm.
children with autism, or special needs like that.
Yes. There's a couple I'd recommend off the top of my head. There's Souls. They are they're specifically created to serve children that have special needs, and they also are a model where they're combining typical children, like typically development children, along with atypical developing children. So it's children that have autism, children that have other special needs, along with children that are typically functioning as you would expect for their age. Let me figure out how to spell.
Thank-
So the Sewell, yes. So I would look at the Sewells. They are great. There's also a place called Firefly, and they are a
Where
place
my
in,
son goes.
yes, yes. So
Okay.
it's Sewell Child Development Center. I'll put the website in the chat if you want to kind of check it out. But they're amazing and people really like them. And there's a couple different locations for that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's always a lot of need for that. And I think we've gone from a model of putting children that have specific challenges like that into just, this is only for this population of child. And I think the model's moving towards like a mixed service model of we put children that are developing with special needs along with children that are developing at a typical rate so that they can kind of learn from each other. And I think that's kind of where that's headed. And Sewell does a really good job of that as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. And one more question about like
Yes.
funding, like state funding and things like that, for kids with special needs. Like, where would I go to just start exploring about that?
I would go to the Colorado Department of Early Childhood website and kind of search through there for like funding for special needs children. I would also just Google that, like funding for special needs childcare programs in Colorado and see what you've seen with that. If you go tour a Sewell too, they might be able to tell you like some of their funding.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Appreciate
and then it's also, I don't know how much time you have, but there's also another program called Anchor Center. That's located in Denver, kind of in what used to be the Stapleton area. I think now it's Central Park, but they serve children who have vision impairments. So some children are very blind, some children can kind of see some shapes, but it's just a really interesting way to see an environment that's been adjusted based on the children that they serve. So like the walls have texture and everything has braille and the playground has kind of been designed with sight issues in mind, but it's really cool to check out.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you so much. I'll definitely look into observing that Anchor Center.
It's a fun day. It's just a fun field trip. It's really interesting, and the staff there is great. Okay, I'm looking to open an after-school club for ages 8 to 15. Does this also require regulations? So that requires a school age license. Basically, the older the child gets, the higher the ratio is. So for school age, the ratio is one adult to 15 children. So that makes licensing a little bit easier. It can also be a little bit more profitable just because you only have to pay one person to be with the 15 children as opposed to infants where it's one teacher to 5 infants. So it seems like a good idea, but that would be a school age license. So if you want to look that up, that's what you're looking for, and that would also be on the state website. Raul, can you put the website for CDEC in here in the chat? Cool. Anthony says just learning about business, no questions at this point, exploring ideas. There's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of things to go and look at. Do I need a training course to have my child in childcare? You don't need to have a training course if you don't want to. There's a system called PDIS, and it is the professional, hold on, I'm gonna put in here, development information system. So that's free to register for. You can just Google it. And there are tons of trainings on there for how to put your infant to sleep safely, how you can manage challenging behaviors at home. It's like childcare specific, but as a parent, there's a lot of really good content in there if you're just kind of curious about, getting trained. As a parent with a child in care, you could definitely do that. If there's something specific you're struggling with, you should ask your child care provider if they have any resources. If it's potty training, sleeping, anything like that, your child care provider should have resources that they can give you around that as well. And Nike, it's a child care license, but it's school age child care license. I'll put that in here too. Other questions? We'll give you guys just another minute to think of questions.
Dora, there is another webinar coming up that's also part in person. Can you explain like what all that covers and would that be the next step for somebody?
I'm not aware of which webinar might be in person. I'm not sure if that's through the SBDC. We do have a childcare essentials class, and that would probably be the next step for you. And I think Raul can speak a little bit more about that and also put the link in here to register. So that class goes into more about the budgeting pieces, really thinking it through, how you would set up if it's an LLC or a sole proprietorship. Like that really walks you through the actions of starting a business and really thinking through and kind of getting something a little bit more concrete. So if you're interested in that, then that essentials class is really great. And that comes with a lot of consultation. I don't know how many of you guys are using the SBDC currently, but they're great. I mean, childcare providers would have to pay like $150 an hour to meet with the kind of specialists the SBDCs have. And the Colorado Department of Early Childhood is currently covering that. So if you enroll in that childcare essentials class, you can meet with an HR person, you can meet with a financial advisor to really put together like what a budget might be to open. You can talk to, I mean, there's professionals in all kinds of things. So it's a great resource, and that's probably the next step. Like if this really is something you want to pursue, then that is really probably the next step. And remember, we put the link to register for that in the chat. Perfect. So that has like a training component, and then there's also one-on-one kind of mandatory advising, and it gives you credit in PDIS too. So it kind of helps you like along that professional development path, which is also really helpful. So I do think like if you go through that readiness checklist and you really are like, I think this really is something I want to kind of learn a lot more about and kind of figure out some details and see. You don't have to do anything, but it's great to learn as much as you can. And there's also just some really good, like broad business knowledge you can get from that essentials class as well. So
Great, thank you.
yeah. Okay. Raul, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. Yes, hi. So the essentials class, one thing, if who has not ever owned a business? Can you just put in the chat a one if you've never owned a business before?
Can you say the question again? I don't get it yet.
Yeah, if you have never owned a business before, please put a one in the chat. So in the chat, you can drop a one, or if you're not sure how to put a one down in the chat, you can just say, I've never owned a business. Just want to get an idea of where everyone's at here. Thank you, Joanna. Anyone else not owned a business? So everyone else has owned a business before. If you have owned a business, put a two in the chat. You just see where we're at.
For test. See, we've got all the tests. Can you see the screen? Have you owned a business?
Yes. Okay, so we've got a couple that have owned business. Anthony and Trang, I'm curious what Delora, what kind of business have you owned or own right now? And for everyone else, and this may still apply for you if currently on home childcare. Awesome. Okay, so you're already in the industry, real estate, IT services. Okay, great. So you have some foundational business knowledge. Now, it's always hard to say where you're at, right, in terms of that level compared to what the program is going to provide. It really is pretty fundamental stuff. So we're going over legal entity, we're going over financials and the very basics of that, like understanding budgeting, a brief touch on things like cash flow statement, balance sheet, and whatnot. Marketing, getting into the idea of like understanding it as a system and a strategy, and going from the top up down. So looking at your customer and understanding what research do you need to do to learn more about your customer and about your competitors and about just the general market around you, right? Childcare is one of those things that is pretty specific to your area, right? And it can get tight as just a few blocks potentially. And taking all of that together to just get the fundamentals of those topics. The one piece that is a little bit different here is because it's childcare oriented, then Dora is going to be going over more of how does that actually apply to a childcare business. So even if you do know some of those things, it still could be useful because we're going to go a little bit more in depth of a lot of the topics that she touched on today, right? And what I would say is I really encourage you to go back through the slides, go to that slide where Dora talked about the readiness and sort of that self-assessment, and look and see where do you think that you need to still learn a lot more. And if those are, you're checking off stuff in the financial, in the marketing, in the legal entity, in the business section, do this program. It's no cost. It's only 4 weeks. It's only an hour and a half once a week, Wednesday nights. It's a little bit of sacrifice for a good start on understanding these concepts. And then the most important thing that comes with that is the one-on-one advising. Okay. So what we do is we make sure Dora connects with every single person doing the program at least twice throughout the program. In the beginning, to get an assessment of where are you, what questions, and get you really on this, like, what is your first and second action steps? What do you need to personally go do to start moving your business forward, right? Because everybody's different at different levels and different points in the journey. And then we ask you to see a financial business advisor. So what they do is they sit down and go, what do you have? If you're already in business, what are you tracking? What aren't you tracking? Because it's really common for us to know what to do, but not do it, especially when it comes to those boring financials, right? And if you haven't started your business, it's thinking about projections. You can go get fake numbers, but that are realistic from the market and punch them into some calculators to see, like, how can you hit the numbers that you need to hit to make this a viable business for you to actually make money doing this, right? And then you might realize, like, you know what, maybe this isn't the business for me. Or, yes, I want to do it. I just got to do these different things to make it happen. That's how you make this real versus shot in the dark type stuff, right? And then you see Dora again at the very end of the program and some recaps, next steps. And one-on-one advising is no cost always through the SBDC. Okay. If you do the program, you'll be with Dora. But then if you are at a different center, your home center, we'll get you connected with your appropriate center so that you have support throughout your entire business journey. That's the idea here. So how does that sound? Are there any questions about the program, that particular program? I really think it's a powerful thing for anyone that's considering opening a childcare business, is in the early stages of owning a business, childcare business. And if you already have a business, you feel like you're really strong there, maybe the program is not, maybe it's a little too fundamental for you, but definitely one-on-one advising could still be something that can help you with unique challenges you're seeing.
We've also had people that have gone through this program that don't necessarily want to open a childcare program, but do have like a child-centered business, or they want to open a place where parents can have coffee and there's a jungle gym there or something, like something that kind of revolves around children, but is not necessarily childcare. And the advising through this course also helps with that as well. And it's still kind of the same stuff around budgeting and considerations and safety and all that other kind of stuff. Ooh, Delora, that sounds cool. You should definitely take this training. Yes. So, I think it's really helpful. And I think that it's basic enough around business that it's helpful and it's easy to understand and accessible without like being too over the top. And, there's not a bunch of stuff in here you don't really need to know. It is helpful. And again, the advising really is important. And the state thinks it's important enough that childcare providers, get some business knowledge and understanding that they are, helping to fund that business essentials class as well. So cool. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? I will also mention that this essential business childcare program training is available statewide as well. So if you don't happen to live in those areas that Raul mentioned, then you also can attend anyway, and the state will still cover it because there's a limited amount of childcare expertise statewide. So we recognize that we are getting people from outside of the specific service area of the North Metro SBDC.
I'm curious, what's one takeaway? If each of you could just share a takeaway, you can unmute yourself and say, or put it down in the chat. What's one major takeaway that you got from today that you're gonna take with you and think about maybe a next step as well?
We have to do forced participation. Otherwise, we don't know if you guys are conscious or not. So, just got to roll with it. Maybe you took this and you're like, maybe this isn't for me. Or you took this and you're like, yes, I think I could do this.
I can I say
Hi.
something?
Yes.
I'm Samia. Really, I like what the readiness checklist. This is it's very organizing. I'm planning to do my own center. I work like 10 years in this field. Now I'm director. Yeah, this is my plan to do the daycare center. And I don't think about how you did the list like this. I don't think about it before, but I feel like it helped me a lot. It's gonna help me
Good.
a lot. I go through this everything, what I have now, what I can did, go like step by step. That I really I like it. And it give me more organized, more plan, more, I feel a little bit comfortable.
Good.
Yeah, to go through all this. And I don't know if I have any question, I can come back to you back
Mm-hmm.
anytime because I'm going to see all the slides you did. I'm going through this, all of them. Really, gonna help me a lot. I feel like that is the one I needed because I plan to do, but I don't know when I gonna start from where.
Yes.
I feel like this now, it's like I'm have to start from this to this. I'm go through all this, and it's good now. I'm not working. I can go. I do all the training courses, whatever, all the time, everything. And I go back to you. Can have a question, can answer me. I can start from where to where, what the steps from what to what. That's really very helpful. I like it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I'm gonna continue to take a lot of courses with you guys, and it's gonna help me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely register for this class if you think that that's something that you want that continued guidance and that support and to understand it a little bit better. That's exactly what this course is for.
I do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Trang said her takeaway was that more kids doesn't necessarily equate to more revenue. And I think that is important to think about. Just because you have more children, there's also more expense. And so I think the trick with that is really figuring out where the balance is. So I think that's a good point. Anybody else want to share a takeaway? I'm gonna assume some of you just took this webinar to take a nap, and I'm slightly offended, but it's gonna be fine.
No, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. But I want to say thank you to Westminster, City of Westminster again, for being partners in this and really taking serious the need for support for childcare businesses. Extremely important industry, and one that is struggling right now. And some childcare providers are crushing it out there, but it definitely is a learning curve. So we can get you there. And thank you all for being here as well, and thinking about what you want to do with moving forward in your small businesses, and especially for Dora, her expertise is very unique. Combining childcare with business, it's very difficult to find experts across the state with this level of breadth of knowledge, depth of knowledge on all these different areas. So you've got a great resource here, and looking forward to continue working with you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.